Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, July 9th, 2019 Finance Committee meeting. The agenda for this evening is year-end budget transfers, a couple of reserve fund transfer requests, public input, member input, approval of minutes, and then finally the committee reorganization for 2020. And then my favorite article, adjournment. I'd just like to open the meeting with a few words. Any of you who aren't aware, our longtime finance director, Bonnie Holston, passed away on the 3rd of July. And she will be waked in the Richardson Funeral Home in Leominster from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock on the 10th of July, which, as of this taping, is tomorrow. She'll be certainly missed by many of us who worked with her over the years. And I just wanted to say those few words. Okay. Steve, if you want to come up and walk us through the
I don't see anybody with printouts. Do you guys need printouts?
I've got,
I have it all on my,
I've got it
You
here.
have to go electronic.
I always go with
I don't have a printer. Sorry, this is the
Do you need?
2019.
I read them, I didn't bring them with me.
I have it.
Me too. Yeah, I looked at them, I didn't.
I can run up and make copies. No problem.
Well, I don't need
necessary.
them.
Nope.
I can look at them on my phone.
Yeah, that's what
I got them on my phone too.
You want to look like me?
I'm good. I retained all that information, I read it all.
Okay. Year-end transfers. So like Fred said, it's a little bit more than we've seen in past years. Remember this, so this is the FY19 budget, which was done in the fall of 2017. At that point in time, we were beginning the conversion of the general ledger to Munis. We're still on the old system at SoftWrite. Took a lot of Bonnie's time to get over that hump of the conversion. So the budget process that she basically handled herself may not have been as smooth as we thought. At the end of this fiscal year, because of the, again, I don't want to keep blaming the conversion, but with the conversion, departments really weren't trained as well as they should have been. Budget reports may not have been getting out to people as they had been in the old system. The departments were given a little bit more leeway in spending than they probably should have been, but that's what happened because they couldn't get the reporting that they needed. So there were some budget overages in some places. We have the money in other funds to transfer over to cover those shortages. I've looked through the budgets. I've looked at the comparison to FY20 to make sure we're not recurring with the same issues. In some cases we are. I'm dealing with those departments. We may have some budget adjustments that have to go to the fall town meeting to fix some things. But again, I'm dealing with those departments and we'll go through them and I'll talk about them as we go through. So, first on the list, we're talking about year-end transfers. First thing we had to do with Bonnie's departure was get an interim town accountant in. The interim town accountant is an expense to the town. It's a consulting fee that we're paying. We basically took the salary remaining, brought it to the expense line, and paying for the consultant out of that. So those are the first two things. We're also using $1,100 of that 31,300 to pay for the clerk wages to transfer in there. When the part-timer that was shared between the clerk and the collector went, if you looked at those two things, it was a wash between them, but they voted on separate lines at town meeting. The collector is in with finance, and the clerk is on their own, so we had to supplement a little bit of the wages for the assistant town clerk that was hired. The other thing with the town clerk, you can see the next two lines, the elections and registrations and the clerk expenses. The clerk's budget is one of those budgets that needs to be looked at. What has been happening is she's been paying a lot of those things out of the election expense. They're really clerk expenses, all the licenses and census and things like that and postage. It's stuff that should go under her budget. She's been for years using the elections budget. We need to transfer that stuff over to the clerks, get a true picture of what the clerks' costs are. So we're using some of the funds from the elections to bring it down to the clerks. It's, again, it's controlled by the same person, it's just different line items voted at town meetings, so we have to cover it. Unemployment expense, we have funds that we can use out of that line item. We always budget at the $100,000 level. The school department, which has the most employees in town, we didn't incur many expenses through their hiring practices this year. So we have some funds that we can distribute out. We're using $48,685 from the unemployment insurance account and the $50,000 from the next line from the general insurance account to cover the next group of expenses that we have. There's a surplus in the general insurance because during the year we receive credits from Maya. As we do safety programs in town, we get credits on the quarter. They've built up this past year. There wasn't many endorsements that we needed to send in for new vehicles and things like that that would have eaten into those credits. So we had a surplus of $50,000 there. So how we're spending that $98,000, planning board wages, they have night meetings, their salary expense went over just $500 there. Same thing with the appeals board, $575. For the planning board piece, usually the part-timer there is covered out of the master plan article. For some reason, a little piece of the salary couldn't be put under the master plan. She must have did something other than the master plan for Marin. Charged her account, she didn't have enough money in there. Information system wages, the new staff person that Nancy hired, it's just a rounding error. Probably instead of rounding up for the salary, they rounded down. Gave her $1,000 error there. Information, excuse me, information systems expenses, $3,000. We're holding $3,000, that there could be an extra bill that comes in that Nancy needs to pay, so we're just encumbering $3,000 there. Health wages, again, the night meetings for the Board of Health, for the part-timer that works up there, $980. Fuel expense in the last week of June, we had a fuel delivery that couldn't be avoided. So that was a $10,000 bill. So instead of $5,000 surplus in the account, we have a $5,000 shortage in the account. And public building expense. This is one of the, oh, excuse me, I skipped one. The town meeting reports, $15,000 there. Extra town meeting that we had. And it doesn't seem like that line item is really budgeted to where it should be anyways. It's, you can see for FY20, it was increased up to $14,000 from the $10,000 that it was, so it's closer, barring another extra town meeting that we have to go through. Public buildings expense.
Excuse me, Steve.
Yes.
Do you know how much the quote extra town meeting costs? Do we have it?
We, again, in this account, we're reserving a bill. We haven't gotten that closed captioning bill yet,
Okay.
but that's about $2,700, I believe. And then it's just the chairs and things like that. The biggest expense is printing the town meeting booklet that gets mailed around and the postage surrounding that. So just in direct expenses, I'd say at least $6,000 to $8,000 for that town meeting.
So it's, okay.
Public buildings expense, it's an addition of $72,400. This is another budget that we need to take a closer look at. There's a lot of things that flow through here. One of the big things is central communications and the phone lines for the towns, not only the IT area, but everybody's cell phones that gets reimbursement and things of that nature. I've been talking with Nancy about that, and I think one of the things that we need to come up with is a standardized policy as far as what we're gonna reimburse, who we're gonna reimburse, instead of just saying, yes, we're gonna pay for your phone plan, which is what's happening in sometimes. Some of these things are dictated by the union contracts, and we have to follow those. But where we have some say, we should at least be consistent across the board.
So Steve, are these town-issued phones, or are these personal phones being reimbursed?
Both. That's why it's all over the board.
Consistent with that, makes sense.
So are the selectmen looking into the phone policy, or Dina, or?
That's one of the things that Nancy and I are going to be bringing to Nina, so some type of policy that we can institute across the town. Fire EMS wages, there's a surplus there of $30,500. There was some training expenses that were always in the fire chief's budget that he didn't use in 19, and again, didn't budget for in 20. There was $37,000 decrease in the training line item for FY '20. So we were able to take that $30,000 from 19 that wasn't used and bring it down to the police dispatch expense.
So did you say, I'm sorry, I just want to understand this clearly.
Yes, sir.
You say didn't budget for it last year, or did?
He did budget for it in 19, did not budget for it in 20 because it was not going to be used anymore. Brought it down to the police and dispatch line item for the $30,500. This is another budget that I'll be taking, I've already sat down with the police chief and the fire chief, for that matter, going through their numbers. When we had to institute the new dispatch protocol out there because of the EMS structure that went through, there's extra expenses incurred there. I don't believe that the budget was really put together to reflect that thing. That event, there was too much reliance on what was determined to be ambulance receipts, which really don't hit a budget, they hit the general fund. So there was some confusion there in the budgeting process with the police chief, I think, when he set his budget there. There was also a grant that was used, the 911 grant. We had to go in and relook at the expenses that were charged to that grant line, reclassify the things that were already sent in to, it's a reimbursement grant to get reimbursed from, and reclassify some of the other expenses that hit that by accident. So that's all taken care of. These last two are new ones of the past day or so. The wastewater, stormwater line item had to be increased because of the proposed septic system that's being done. We had the article for the two articles for a total of 400 and change, I think, over 2 town meetings. That money was expended, and some of the extra funds that were there were encumbered to pay for a bill that was thought to come in. The bill came in, actually 2 bills came in that were more than what was set aside as the encumbrance. So we have this wastewater line item that's in the budget for the existing system there that had about $6,000 left in it for the year. We transferred the overage from the smart septic system and pushed it to that, and now we need to cover the excess there. We can't, once we push this money there, even though we have an authorization to borrow, we can't push those expenses back because it'll be a different fiscal year. So the town's gonna have to just eat that $19,000, basically, $12,000. That wasn't covered. Okay. We probably, depending on what happens, they may move forward with the $2.2 million authorization to borrow. I don't know what's going on with the project. It's basically been on hold for the past couple of months. So that's where that stands.
So it hasn't picked up, well, it's only a week since the fiscal year started, but no activity has shown up from here?
Nothing. And if I had known about these bills before, when it was time to borrow, would I have borrowed to cover it? No, we probably would have done the same thing here.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So with all those transfers, we will need a vote of the Finance Committee, and I put that down there. Unless there's any other questions, details of these
Steve,
things?
on the, let's see, the $175,000 worth of transfers. If not, I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to vote to support the $175,649 transfers that Steve has just presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And vote.
So the next section has to do with the town's revolving funds. And this is something that I learned myself. I did not know this. One of the things of having the consulting firm come in, is they've kind of seen a lot of things in different communities and are pretty well versed in Mass General laws, which is turning out to be a very good thing. The accountant that we have on staff right now from the consultant is actually, she's very young. Steve has met her. She's very young, but she's very good. We were looking.
She keeps telling me no.
Her name is Bailey, and for some reason I have this habit of calling her Brittany. So when she tells me bad news, I say it's Brittany talking. And when she gives me good news, it's Bailey. So one of the things that they discussed was, and brought to my attention, was revolving funds. And if you remember, in Article 3 each year, we vote revolving funds to reestablish them for the year. And they just roll from year to year with this town meeting vote. And one of the things that is being voted in Article 3 is how much money we can spend out of the revolving fund. And if we go to the very first one, for example, inspectional services, in Article 3 was a $100,000 limit for that revolving fund. But if you look in Article 4, we're transferring in $125,000 from that revolving fund to offset Roland's budget. Nobody thought twice about that, but we need to change that. I was surprised to find out in reading Mass General Law that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen can change that limit and re-up that limit. So you can't vote to accept another revolving fund. Town meeting has to do that, but you can vote to change the limit. So by changing these limits, we can then become legal for FY19. In some cases, what was voted in FY20 this past May was upped and may cover what is anticipated to be expended out of those budgets. In some cases, we're going to have to go back to fall town meeting and re-up those limits instead of waiting till next July for you guys to do it.
So we have to vote it on town meeting floor, or we can vote it?
We have the options, we can bring it to town meeting and just bring an updated Article 3 and have town meeting vote it, or we can wait till this time next year for the two boards to do it. I would rather go to town meeting and just get it done.
Clean it up.
Well, why would we have to wait till this time next year for the selectmen and the Fincom to do it? I don't understand that.
If we don't bring it to town meeting.
Well, couldn't we just vote, if you want to say, we're going to change 2020 right now and bring it to Fincom, we vote on it? What am I missing? I can see why it makes more sense to go to town meeting, but I'm just trying to understand,
Why, we're in 2020, why can't we vote it, is the question.
yeah,
To raise the,
Yes, at some point you could.
okay. Okay. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Generally, budget transfers can only happen within the last 30 days of the year, up until July 15th. Those powers were expanded a couple of years ago. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. I'm just not sure whether the
This is considered a budget transfer?
yeah, whether that applies to.
We're increasing that.
Okay, all right.
I would rather bring it to town meeting.
Yeah,
Let town
yeah,
meeting
that's
vote.
clearly the better, I
Bring it
just
to
don't
town
know.
meeting.
I think we should bring it to
Understand where
town
things
meeting
are.
in the fall.
yeah, I agree with that.
Yep, me too.
So the first one I kind of explained, the inspectional services of the building permits that are generated from the building department. The limit there was $100,000. We have $125,000 already voted from Article 4 to come in. And during the year, they also pay some of the inspectors' expenses, just out-of-pocket expenses that they have. So we're looking to revise that limit up $35,000 to $135,000, which would cover everything. FY20, the limit is set at $130,000. I have to look at how that stands, because what went into the account this past year was a little less on building permits, are down from previous years, so the fund didn't replenish the money that we're taking out. So I really need to look at that, and look at Roland's budget to make sure that we're gonna be okay.
How did the original expenditure limit of $100,000, how did that come about? Who set that limit and when? Or is that set by the,
I didn't go back to see when it was
so it was.
when it was done. I mean,
sometime
it's voted at every single town meeting, so at some town meeting, the limit may have been upped because we were getting more building permits in, and we were gonna be able to offset more of the budget. I'm sure that when the $125,000 was put into Article 4, the intention was probably to do the $125,000 there. It just got missed, that's all.
But if we're building less, or there's less building permits, wouldn't there be less expense on the inspection side as well? Because you're not inspecting as much stuff.
The inspectors are employees of the town, and they work X number of hours per week.
Just doesn't matter. So we pay them whether they're inspecting something or if they're just doing paperwork.
And that's up to the manager to control their hours. Okay. The next
So
one.
Are
oh,
you saying
sorry.
that they're hourly employees or
Yes,
salary?
they are. They're hourly employees.
Hourly.
Non-benefit, benefit eligible employees, both of them. sealer and weights of weights and measures. So we have a company, I guess, that comes in and does all the scales and gas pumps and everything in town. It's Neshoba or whoever, and they do all the surrounding towns. Their contract was increased from what it was, I guess, at the $3,000 level. In 18, it went up to $6,000. In 19, it went up to $7,000. Unfortunately, the bill for 18 didn't hit the revolving fund until 19, so both expenses hit in the same year. That's why we're increasing the amount to be $14,000, because there was a little incidental expenses that also came out of the revolving account. So
That
we
should
need
be
an
a
increase there.
one-time lift.
Yes,
Next year it
the
goes back
FY
down.
'20 limit is back down to 8,000. So it was increased from the 3 to the 8, which is in line with where the bill should be next year. Again, you're seeing a lot of these things are just things that slip through the cracks. It's just sloppy, I guess. I don't know. Spectacle Pond. This one was definitely a mistake that was made. And I attached the memo from the Clean Lakes Committee on this one. There was a project that the Clean Lakes Committee wanted to do back in 16, I believe. Spectacle Pond and Lake Manawanaki Flow Monitoring Project. And they submitted a warrant article to go in the May 2nd, 16 town meeting. For some reason, that never made it to the warrant. The Clean Lakes Committee wasn't aware that it never made it to the warrant, and they had put the project off because they had other things that they needed to do. Corey this year at the Water Department decided to start that project, thinking that he had the money from the warrant article, went ahead with the project, submitted bills to the accounting department, and the accounting department said, wait, there's nothing to pay this bill against. So what we're doing, and what we have to do, the Clean Lakes Committee has a line item in Article 4. So we reclassified all the expenses we could to that article to use that money up. The remaining money will be coming out of the Spectacle Pond Cell Tower Fund, which is dedicated to the Clean Lakes Committee anyways. The only thing is we need to up the limit from 46,000 to the 58,108.07, the $12,000 increase that Corey needed to fund that project. The remaining dollars, just to put it on your radar, the remaining dollars that are needed on that project, about $24,000-25,000 or so. He's going to be putting an article on the fall town meeting to take some money from the Clean Lakes Fund, again, to use for this project, so he has a line item to spend against.
So Steve, we're doing that in conjunction with Westford, is that correct?
No, that's Forge Pond. This is Spectacle Pond.
And Lake Manawanaki. I don't know the specifics.
Well, Forge Pond is like Mount.
Right, Manawanaki
It's not
splits,
spectacle, though.
we split it with.
Spectacle Pond.
Between
so-
Spec and
Yeah, I know.
Manawanaki?
What?
Is it between Spec and Manawanaki? Which
No.
would be a Littleton.
No, there's a sandbar built up on the Westford side by the beach, and it's keeping the water from draining out when they take the weir out of the dam. So when they try to lower the lake level to kill the
Basis.
well, they're not, all the grass and stuff that grows up. The sandbar prevents the lake from draining. So I know it's a joint project between Westford and Littleton. It's $40,000 each. Is that right?
Off the top, I really don't understand.
Yeah.
Corey was going to be here tonight, and planned on being here, but he's at the light department meeting tonight over at the light department, so he sends his apology. I told him I could answer questions, but evidently I can't.
What'd you get out there with the shovel, Steve?
Well, I live right across from that sandbar, so I want to see that thing going.
Oh, so it's personal.
Oh, yeah.
One is up to us from
And the Clean Lakes Committee also voted to authorize that transfer. They had to, because the funds are under their control. Cemetery revolving funds. The cemetery commissioners have also voted for this transfer. What happened here with the money that was coming into the revolving fund as people purchased grave sites at the cemetery was coming into the revolving fund. As you know, in Article 4, there's some money coming in from sale of lots and one other cemetery fund. All the receipts from the cemetery department were being placed into this revolving fund instead of going out to the different funds where they should have been. I asked Tom to go back and reclassify the entire year to put the funds where they belonged. We did that. We pushed the funds to Article 4 where they belonged. And one of the things that when you purchase a grave site there, some of that money should be going to perpetual care and the trust funds. The trust commission, the cemetery commissioners last year voted for the first time in quite a while to put money into the trust funds. I've talked to Andrew, who's also a trust commissioner, Andrew Samarco. He's a cemetery commissioner also. Explained to him that really needs to be an every year type of thing, and some of those receipts that come in should be earmarked. So that's what this increase is. The cemetery commissioners pushed $20,000 into the perpetual care trust funds for this year. So that's what that increase is for. Moving forward, the funds will be going to the correct accounts. The cemetery commissioners are well aware that they need to allocate some of this revolving fund to the perpetual care trust funds moving forward. So this could be something that we have to look at special town meeting in the fall to just up this limit also, to take that into account.
But, I mean, upping just the amount they can spend, right? I mean, that's.
Yes,
the issue
that's all it is.
The issue is, we need to make sure there's enough money in there though, right?
Oh, there's enough money in there.
Oh, there isn't.
In any of these accounts,
Yeah,
there's enough money to cover
okay.
these extra expenses that are hitting you.
Weren't put in the right places.
The only thing is, town meeting didn't vote to spend the amount that was spent out of it. That's the only thing that's happening here. The money coming in was fine, the money going out was fine, the even out, they were upped to take into account the increased usage, like the building permits. It's just that it wasn't followed through to Article 3. That's the only thing that's
It's one of those
happening
things that
here.
we just started doing, that the revolving funds, that we weren't doing that. We found out the auditor, well, it was just a year or two ago, right, said, you know, you need to vote these every year, because we weren't doing that. Right?
Correct.
So now the accounting is catching up
Right,
with.
right. So, and the purpose of having those amounts on there, that's effectively
That's your budget.
it's a budget, right? That's effectively what it is.
Absolutely.
We think of, well, why not just make it a whole big number for everybody, but that really is the budget then for that group.
Yes. You're authorizing the expenditures, so
Right.
the departments who have control of those funds can spend it. So that's why there are limits.
So this is, some of this is with sloppy accounting. Not illegal, not
it was just, the money's saying, money's going in, money's going out, but this is tightening up how it should be done.
Correct.
Correct. I'm just trying to get a picture of why. This isn't
Like I
new,
said
this has been
before,
going on a
there
while.
was so many things going on at the time, and I don't want to keep bringing up the conversion, but
Yeah.
that took most of people's time up in the accounting office, and
Yeah.
upping a limit on Article 3 just
Right.
was missed. That's all.
That's okay, so, but my point, my question, I guess, would be though, as part of the budget process, like we go through the departmental budgets, line by line by line, we really need to do that for these as well.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Where we just,
They are shown. They are in the budget documents that are given every department that, I checked it today. Every department that has control of a fund, it was written down in the books, at least in 19. I
Yeah.
didn't go into 20s to look.
Okay.
Permitting software, these are, again, part of the permit fees that the building department takes in. They bought a new, or an upgrade to their existing system that handles the permits upstairs on the third floor. System cost $38,000, which included the first 2 quarters of maintenance. And after this is just a quarterly maintenance fee. Again, Article 3 wasn't increased to allow for the purchase. Upping it to this $45,000 covers the purchase that was done. Next year's limit is set at $20,000, which is sufficient to cover the quarterly fees that come in for support.
So this detail that you talked about that's in the individual budget, that $38,000 for that software was there,
Yes,
even though we knew the limit was only $15,000 for the account? That check wasn't done, the
Exactly.
validation point of the other, okay,
yes.
okay. All right, we
Sufficient
understand.
money.
Yeah, okay, yep.
so the bill was paid,
Bill was paid out of the revolving fund, yes.
even though the revolving fund was not authorized for
Correct,
the amount that it was paid.
correct. But even though town meeting voted $125,000 in Article 4, it wasn't authorized in the Article 3 that was just voted before. So we're
It is
just
what it is, right?
fixing things up to
Yep.
tighten it up. Better go forward.
You've been busy, Steve.
So I need a vote. Unless there's any other questions on things.
I make a motion to amend Article 3 of the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting by increasing the spending limits of the revolving funds as detailed above.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, no other questions, sorry about that. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, moving right along, Steve.
Moving right along to page 4, the enterprise funds. Parks and Rec. I have spent a lot of time with Parks and Rec Department, with Alicia in particular. Was on the phone with the chair of the commissioners this afternoon, so they were understanding their meeting right now also in voting these same things that they need to vote to authorize these transfers, as these funds are in their control. What happened here, you're aware that the enterprise funds have a separate article at town meeting. Water Department, for example, I think is Article 5, and Article 6 is the enterprise fund for Park and Rec. Enterprise funds basically are their own little budgets. They work just like the town's budgets, only on a smaller scale. The one caveat with an enterprise fund is that the town is on the hook if the fund isn't in balance at the end of the year. When I started to look through these budgets, probably around the May timeframe, we kind of saw that the spending at the Park and Rec Department was more than it should be. We got in touch with Alicia at that point in time and explained the situation to her and what was going on, and told her that she needed to control spending from that point forward for the rest of the year. She did that, or else this transfer would have been a little worse than it was. What I found that happened, if you recall, the general fund supplements the Park and Rec budget in FY19. It was to the tune of $193,000. In FY20, I believe it's $230,000. I think that comes to mind. In looking at the budget detail for 19, when that $392,000 that appears on the voted salary line for the budget was compiled, it looked at the community ed salaries, it looked at the rec department salaries, and ignored the full-time staff salary from that $193,000 that was brought into the budget. Some of that 193 has to do with benefits, to pay for the full-time staff's benefits also. So that would create a little bit of a cushion down in the expense line. But the salary line was totally underfunded because when you think about it, the general fund may be supplementing some of their budget, but they still need to show it as an expense underneath. So you have the revenue coming in at 193, you need to show the expense for the 193 down the bottom. That was missed.
I would think from the 18-19, we would have seen that, the differences. Did you go back and look at that at all or not?
I did not. I did look at 20. Same thing happens in 20. I've already sat down with Alicia, again talked with the Park and Rec commissioners. Alicia's homework over the next few weeks is to go through her FY20 budget and fix all the things, or present a budget to me that in her mind fixes these things. Then we have to figure out how we're going to pay for those things. So the cause is that they're not accounting for that salary line. The effect in this budget is that the town has to supplement, I think it's just under $58,000 of the Park and Rec budget that needs to be picked up by the general fund. As I explained to Alicia, it's not my intention to let them off the hook for this $58,000, and that will be incorporated in their FY20 revised budget as a return to the general fund for that $58,000. And if that means we're hitting their free cash, then we're hitting their free cash to do it. They have $230,000 at the end of FY18 in free cash that's been certified by the state. They used $50,000 of that free cash in FY19. That is listed there. The intent that they put it there in FY19 was to pay for some capital that they wanted to do. They did not use that. We then, Park and Rec Commission tonight is voting to reallocate that $50,000 to the salary line to bring that overage down. So in next year's budget, as again the shortfall, we'll be covering the general fund money. We'll be covering any shortfall that she can't make out of redoing her budget. She has three options. She can increase the fees if she underestimated the fees. She can decrease her expenses if she found that she has some wiggle room there to do that. The third option is to hit free cash and bring more in from the reserve fund. So there will be some of that done, because I don't think she can make up that full difference from those first two things. She could probably cover it, I think, but I don't think to the extent that it's underfunded right now. So at the fall town meeting, we'll be revoting the Park and Rec Enterprise Fund budget.
That's going forward, that'll be,
Going forward, it'll be fixed. So there's, again, it's a complicated thing. I tried to outline it as best I could. So the first thing is that the Park and Rec Commission, as I mentioned, will be voting the $50,000 transfer from the reserve fund up into the salary line. That brings the adjustment on the salary line from $155,000 deficit to $105,000 deficit. What we did on the expense side is we had to reclassify some of the expenses from the Park and Rec Department. The only thing we have in common, line item-wise, with Park and Rec is employee benefits. So we're taking the charge of their employee benefits to the tune of $57,890, reclassifying those to the town's employee benefit line item, which we can do without a vote of either committee. We can just reclassify those from the accounting standpoint. That creates a cushion in the expense line of $105,000. And that is the amount that you'll be voting to transfer up from expenses to salary of $105,214. Knowing that the town will receive their $58,000 back next year.
Do you need a motion from us on that?
Yes, please.
If I read this right, make a motion to approve the transfer of $105,214 in the fiscal year 19 budgeted expenses to fiscal year 19 budgeted salaries, correct?
Correct.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
And just for informational reasons, tonight, the Board of Water Commissioners is meeting. They also have an enterprise fund. They also have the reserve fund line item. They have $200,000 reserve fund in their budget. They only use $72,000 of that to cover some salary overages that they have. That's what's being voted at the Water Department tonight. So that remaining money goes back into their free cash next year. They've been building up their free cash, as well they should, just in case of need in the Water Department.
So additional salaries, these are additional people have been hired, these are permanent people going forward?
The Water Department?
Mm-hmm.
I believe they did some extra work in preparation for the Wickham Ave things.
Trying to figure out why you would be, why you wouldn't have your budget right for that, right?
This is something that the Water Department does every year. The Water Commissioners have voted that transfer every year. Whatever they need to take out of the reserve, they've done that. On the opposite side, the Park and Rec Commissioners have not voted the use of their reserve fund each of the years that they've used it. We're making sure that they voted from this point forward.
So they do it, but they don't vote it, is that what you're saying?
They didn't know they needed to vote.
I understand.
I also provided a list of capital articles that will be closed out at the end of FY19. As I mentioned, the policy of the town is to close unused articles after 3 years or when the project is done. Some of these have gone on just a little bit further than 3 years. I've checked with every single department that was handling these things. I checked with Steve many times on the building department's items, just to make sure that things are okay. Schools are okay with closing out their articles. So these are funds that will go to free cash at the end of the year, be available when free cash is certified for the May town meeting, and not available for this town meeting coming up.
I noticed you did make a note that the 3 old warrant articles for the studio, the money will go back into the cable fund.
Yes, it does. Yep, it goes back to the fund that generated the dollars for the request. So the cable money came out of the PEG access funds, it goes back to the PEG access funds. Yep. Everything else goes back to the general fund.
Maybe I'm missing something, but wasn't there, we were gonna close out Alumni Field also?
Yep, Alumni Field is $181,140.
It's over on the right.
On the right,
On
towards the
right
bottom.
side. Okay, thanks.
So that total, including the amount that's, the 29,000 that's going back to the PEG access funds, is $653,000. There was a lot of discussion over closing out first the fire department construction and then Alumni Field. But in my mind, those projects are done. The field is constructed and so is the fire station. There may be some requests come next May to use some of that alumni money for different purposes, but at least it's going back to town meeting.
Mm-hmm. If you got any complaints here on that one,
No. If the project's done.
it's the right way to do it.
Snow and ice deficit, these are funds that will be available in the fall. We always budget or reserve in the budget process the amount that we need to cover for deficit in the snow and ice money. This year, the deficit was only $204,000, and we reserved $450,000, so there's $245,000 that'll be available for capital in the fall. Corey has already staked his claim into some of that money. But actually, that'll come out of the spec pond cell tower funds. That's warrant articles, ambulance receipts. Ambulance receipts, again, this is kind of semantics that, but it is Mass General Law. At the time, ambulance receipts are an account that's called,
Steve?
yes.
You don't need a vote of our support to close the articles.
No.
I just want
just-
to make sure we didn't miss
That's
something.
me.
That's okay. Go for it, okay. All right, just make sure we didn't miss something.
Nope.
Okay.
Ambulance receipts. So ambulance receipts are called a receipt reserved for appropriation. It's not a revolving fund. Even though we often refer to it as a revolving fund, it's not. Receipts reserved for appropriation is exactly what it says. It needs to be appropriated by town meeting. That's the only money that can be taken out of that. You can't spend directly out of that fund. It has to move into, or some type of appropriation that town meeting has
So that has to be
authorized.
voted every year?
And it is.
Receipts are, yeah.
It is, in Article 4, there's a budget offset that comes in against the fire department's line item. That's essentially town meeting saying that they're authorizing this transfer from the ambulance funds. Nothing else can hit that account except for what town meeting says. Okay? Unfortunately, the funds that you're voting have to be in the account at the time of the vote. So it has to be May 7th. We voted at town meeting to expend $650,000 out of the ambulance fund. Unfortunately, there was only $552,000 in the fund. Now, the logical mind would say, well, we can at least transfer $552,000. No. It's as if that vote was never taken. because the funds weren't there to appropriate. So at the fall town meeting, the town is going to have to again vote a $650,000 transfer from ambulance receipts to offset the fire department budget in Article 4.
And there'll be enough in there now to cover it, there'll be $650 by then?
There is $658,000 in there today.
And going forward, how do we do that? There's not enough, you have to do some in spring and then just assume you're gonna be doing some every fall town meeting? Because you may not have a full year's worth ahead of time, effectively, right?
Effectively, this coming budget season, when we do the 21 budget,
Mm-hmm.
could be a little shortfall in,
There's just, there'll be 1 year where you take a hit, where you just can't transfer as much.
correct.
And there's no
But
way
their
to
receipts are
change.
going up. Their receipts, because of the ALS service, which used to run high 20,000s a month, is now into the 40,000s a month. So they are picking up in the receipts. But that was reflected in the extra money that was allocated
It
out
would
at
almost
this town
seem
meeting.
if we were able to shift the budget calendar for ambulance receipts from May 1st to May 1st,
That's essentially how you have to look at it.
you know,
yes.
so maybe there's a year that we have to fund it out of the general fund to get on cycle.
Once we're-
So then we don't have to go through this every year.
I
Whatever it is on May
think
1st, we
the-
vote on May 2nd or 3rd or 5th or whatever the,
The saving grace on that is going to be the increase in receipts that they've taken in. So that's going to offset the timing difference that we could have.
right.
And there's no way to change the designation, so it's a revolving fund. No way to do that.
Mass general law.
Mass general law, so we can't, great, okay. I'll vote it that way.
It's your representation of that in action.
So just know that that also will be going to fall town meeting. And the last thing, I just wanted to reiterate that the Park and Rec Enterprise Fund, and that we'll be taking a look at that again. And basically, what Alicia needs to do is rework the budget from the ground up one more time.
Okay, now that we're spending it in 19, they're giving it back to us in 20. When's the money available?
It goes to free cash.
As soon as it comes back into free cash
Gets certified later, yes.
would be certified.
Okay.
Mhm.
Free cash will be certified after town meeting?
After the year closes.
Year
yep.
closes,
So after 20 closes,
be this time of year, right?
So it's a year out. So we get it back
be
and it's a year out.
May 2 years.
Typical, so it becomes
Typical
typical free
cycle.
cash flow out.
Yep.
Okay.
January, it's May, but it's-
So we pay it in 19, we get it back in 21, basically.
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Any questions for our esteemed guest?
And the good news is,
That was a lot when you emailed it to us, that was a lot to digest. I was like, this can't be right. It was- No, thanks for explaining it to us.
And
That was,
thank you for all your hard work.
That-
This is
that's
amazing.
enormous.
This is amazing to have this level of detail and this level of clarity that we just haven't had. So I think kudos to you and Brittany or Bailey.
No, this is Bailey. This is
Bailey.
Bailey.
This is Bailey.
This is a good one. yeah.
This is good news.
This is a good one.
For Bailey. A heck of a job, Steve. So you have the votes you need
Yep.
for us on these issues. And you said the selectmen were gonna meet it on the 15th. They're not, they don't have a meeting scheduled.
They don't have it posted yet, but
Yeah.
they have
Okay,
a meeting
just,
scheduled.
I think I sent you a note today. I looked on the schedule and I didn't see it, so, okay,
It's just not posted yet.
okay.
So the other thing you have is 2 reserve fund transfers. I sent those out
Right.
last week or the week before. The first one is for $6,000 for the Baker House. The Historical Commission is looking for $3,000 for some archaeological work, and $3,000 to hire a historic preservation consultant who would prepare the submission to get on the National Historic Register.
And there's any reason why this can't come back at fall town meeting with CPC funds?
I think they wanted to get the project going.
Doesn't designation as a historic preservation, whatever, doesn't that limit what the town can do with the property once that's put in place?
Seems
I
so.
think, since we don't know, since the town paid $250,000 on that house, it's still sitting there. Nobody's told me what they're gonna do with it. I think the ball is still in the air about what the town should do with that piece of property. And if you make that designation, then a lot of the town's options are out the window.
Weren't they gonna move it?
Well, we didn't see the presentation given to the BOS, and I didn't watch it on TV. There was a presentation given.
I sent the slides
It was a slide deck that came.
Yeah, I didn't.
part of,
So-
part of the thing. I wasn't at the board meeting that they recommended this transfer, so.
I agree with Alan now. I mean, until we really know what the plan is,
You know,
why tie our hands?
we have spent buku money on putting the long store in storage, and we're probably still paying for that. And it will probably be in storage when you're long in the tooth.
Thank you, dear.
So,
Boy, what a guy.
so anyway, I don't think we should be pursuing that for that piece of property until we're sure that we're gonna use it in a historic fashion.
Unless it opens us up to some type of grants that I'm missing or something. I don't know if that's, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't see the presentation, so.
To put something into historic designation, National Register, you have to follow their guidelines on everything you do with the property.
But you need to do that before, even if the town were to sell that property to an organization, this would still need to happen because this was the intent, the original purchase anyway. Before we would sell it, that way there's some control over the buyer and what they
So
can do.
they're not gonna
So
tear it down.
I get why it's being done. If the intent is to sell it to an organization that's going to do something, I just don't know if that's.
Well, I mean.
Right now, it's just the building that's.
You still don't wanna spend the money if you're not gonna do it, but I'm just trying to understand from this, just because they spend the money on this consultant, what is the process to actually put in the request to have it on the national, I mean, is that a whole nother vote? Or does the money, yeah, if they go forward, they can just go forward without, you know what I'm saying?
So this is to help the process of the submittal to get the designation.
Right, but so if they get this money and they get this report, can somebody go in and then just submit it to be on the national with that, or do they need some kind of a town vote on the change of status of this property? I mean, regardless, you really don't want to spend the money unless you're sure you want to go there, I guess, but I'm not sure that voting this money means that they're gonna go ahead and submit it, but I don't.
I don't know that.
Okay.
Preparation for this.
Yeah, right, I
It
understand.
would be a good guess that that's.
But
they're
then if they
gonna
want to
it.
do it, but I just don't know what the approval process is, though, right?
Well, I went through the process with another building in town a long time ago when I was on the historic commission at the time. But I cannot remember whether at the end of it, when we would have
We
submitted
needed a
it,
vote or not.
or we had to have a town vote. I
Right.
don't remember.
Okay. Well,
You know,
I guess, well, my only question, other question would be is, I mean, do we want to have this, the presentation here, I mean, have, you know, pump this down the road, another meeting, and have them come in and talk to us about it? Or do we want to just say no? I mean, I guess that's the question.
Well, I looked at the slide deck and, you know, there's a lot of pretty pictures, but I didn't see a schedule of activities or any kind of a timeline associated with the presentation. So I don't know if this is step one or if it's step three, you know, I don't know, I don't have enough information.
Let's ask them to come in and give
I'd
us a
like to,
presentation.
at the very least, me personally, you know, I would like to watch that. If they're not gonna come in and present, I'd like to watch that DOS meeting just to see the presentation. Maybe there's something in there that I'm not getting right now.
If they
Make me a
want
little
the
more
money.
comfortable.
If they want the money, they should come in and ask for it.
Well, and I guess the,
Maybe ask
you know,
questions too.
traditionally, spending money out of the reserve fund,
That's the other thing.
you know,
Yeah, that's the other
9
thing.
days into the year.
Yeah.
Doesn't meet the criteria.
It's pretty much an emergency.
Right, this doesn't seem like.
And this doesn't smell like an emergency without more information, would be my take on it. You know, if the selectmen have got money that they want to spend on this, let them spend it. But I would at least want somebody to come in and make a presentation, talk to us about it. If they really think it's something we want to spend money out of the reserve fund for. Is my 2 cents on it. That's just my personal 2 cents.
So that was the first thing I actually thought of when I got involved in all the other stuff in the conversation here. But that was the first thing I thought when I read it. Why is this an emergency out of the emergency fund, basically? But
It's not a lot of money, but it still should be done right. Make sure that everybody's got an oar in the water and they're rowing in the same direction.
I think from what I'm hearing, there's two separate issues. One is whether it justifies a reserve fund transfer or not. The other is, do you justify actually expending the dollars? So if it's a question of where to spend the money from, I would think if you're not going to do a reserve fund transfer, then yes, the selectmen's budget could probably support a $6,000 expense, and maybe the alternative is to go to the CPC committee and get $6,000
The CPC funds that.
of funds from that
Right. that's
to do
exactly-
the project.
It's a perfect
And
project
then
for CPC
It,
dollars.
it offsets what was taken out of the selectmen's budget. That doesn't answer the questions of whether you want to start that process or not. So that's something that you'd probably have to,
We can get the presentation scheduled for our next meeting. I mean, we meet in August, right?
We'll be beyond are we beyond the 2 weeks though of year-end transfers?
well, this is
This
just
is
emergency
in-
transfer, so
this is for FY
this is our,
'20.
This is
this is
in
our money to
August,
spend.
20.
So that's why.
We're 2 weeks in.
I'm saying you're 9 days into it, and this project comes up, and my saying.
Yeah, let's get them to come in and present to us and sell us on it a little bit, make us feel warm and fuzzy about approving this.
It might still be CPC. I think at least part of this board is gonna feel like it belongs in the CPC bucket, but maybe I can be convinced otherwise. But I don't wanna vote tonight personally in the negative, not knowing all of those details.
Okay.
That's all right.
So do you want this ad hoc committee to come in and talk to you, or are you going to watch the presentation?
I want them to come in.
Want to come in?
I'd like them to come in, that's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
the presentation doesn't tell you
We
everything.
can't ask questions.
Exactly,
Right.
Have them come in and pitch to us, they want the money,
Yeah.
they'll come in and talk to us.
And why should it be a reserve fund?
Right.
And if the selectmen want to pay for it to get the project going and have CPC come back in the fall, that'd be fine with me. And if that's a message that goes back to the selectmen, it's fine with me. We don't have a scheduled meeting, so I don't know when we'll be getting together again, but we'll try to. if that's the will of
We'll
the.
call you.
Should have a meeting in August.
Says our next chair.
Okay, can we have a motion regarding this? So Steve can go back?
Yeah, I make the motion that we ask this ad hoc committee to come in and present what they presented to the Board of Selectmen, so we can do Q&A, question and answers, and we can vote on it then.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to invite the ad hoc committee in to present to us and ask, where we can ask questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. Okay, and the other reserve fund transfer, Steve? is-
The other is a project that the selectmen have been talking about for some time. The selectmen have policies and regulations. That includes every policy that has been voted in town, plus some regulations that they have developed over the years. The combination of those things probably hasn't been looked at in quite a while. So there's some things in their regulations and policies that are in conflict with the policies that have been voted after the fact, that are also incorporated in the same thing.
I think so.
Good example, there's some things in the town bylaw for personnel committee, for example, that are spelled out that are in direct conflict with what are in the selectmen's policies. So I think,
So what skills is this individual got? Do they have to be a lawyer? Or, I mean,
Well, that's what I was thinking. It sounds like almost a paralegal, but if you read the job description and the hourly rate, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm wondering if it wouldn't fit better in the senior work-off program. There's some pretty talented retirees that might want to work and do that kind of thing. I don't know. I just,
It also says it's a summer internship.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
that
the second
means
week in
it's a
July, and by the time you hire
Summer's
somebody,
half over, but
Yeah.
that means
That
it's
doesn't make any
probably a
sense.
college student. It's an
Yes.
internship program.
could be fall, but it's not gonna be a summer internship at this point.
and they were planning on paying how much? 12, 15 bucks an hour?
I think,
It was
yeah,
around 12,
12.
something.
12 to 15 maybe, depending on experience.
Maybe more than that. a month.
I think the project's gonna move forward, whether the transfer or not.
$3,000, yeah, why do they come in reserve fund transfer for that? I don't know.
We spent $3,000 more foolishly. Let's go for it.
Yeah, well,
Well, I think it's a good project.
Yeah,
I,
it's
the
a good
intent is
project. I just
actually
wanted the
good.
quality of the
It's certainly a
person
needed
that you
project.
have
Yeah, yeah,
in.
right.
You know, if
wouldn't
for $3,000
we
bucks.
tell departments this early in the year to go away and manage it and come back and see us later in the year if they overspend? Instead of just handing out money 9 days into the year.
I mean, we spend a lot of money on consultants for different things that just think, you know, looking at $3,000, is it enough? Is what my concern is, and how are you gonna get a quality job? I mean, I'm all for bringing in interns to do work, but is this the right type of job for an intern? I don't know.
I don't know, it could be a good job for somebody who's studying government, things like that, they wanna come in, you know, but they hadn't probably, you know, up the level, but,
But once again, is this
Pouring
a
through.
reserve fund transfer?
right, yeah, no, yeah, right, yeah.
I
where's the
absolutely
emergency?
agree that I have no problem with being an intern, you know,
Right,
qualified person come in, interview, they pick somebody, great, get this done, but I guess the intent of the reserve funds is getting me
Emergency.
right now. And
It almost seems like it's a cookie jar.
Yeah. I mean, we've been saying that some of the policies to us are emergency anyway for a long time, but I think, I don't know exactly what they're specifically getting at. You explained that some of the obviously policies in place from different boards that are in conflict with each other. That's the main concern.
That are in conflict with some old regulations that the selectmen have written down in.
Yeah. So this is outside even financial policy, correct?
You remember the thick book these
Yeah.
guys used to have?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's some of those old blue laws from way back when.
Exactly.
They need updating. I think it's the right notion to do this. I just question whether $3,000 is enough. It's gonna be a lot of work going through that.
Do you think it's the right bucket as well, though? I mean, I don't know where else that comes from.
I mean, it's not a big dollar amount for a year-end transfer, but, you know, I kind of agree with the principle, like where the cookie, as you say, the cookie jar, you keep diving into it, but I'm not really wrapped around the axle about that so much as I think that it might not be enough money, so then we're gonna come back and revisit this again if it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
So who would manage this individual? And how would you
I think
ensure that?
it's going to be done through the town administrator's office.
Hire Keith.
I mean, it's a good start. There you go. Good starting point.
Can we make you a
It's
special
good
town
project.
employee? Do you get 2 salaries?
So I'm assuming that this was brought on by the new town administrator,
This is from Cindy Napoli.
Cindy.
It was discussed at the 24th Selectmen's meeting, and they suggested Fincom support it through a reserve fund transfer.
Tell them this Fincom suggested the administrative department supports it for $3,000 and come back later when they need the money.
Okay.
Or not. I'll defer to the committee on this.
I mean,
You're right, $3,000.
I like the idea of doing it, I just, $3,000 is not a lot of money, but, yeah, the procedural piece of it's a little annoying, but.
Well, giving them 6 weeks, say, over the summer, really at the end of this, 6 weeks to review all of our policies, or many of the policies, and come up with, that's quite a bit of time.
It's
Can I
not gonna be
make
6
a,
weeks. They gotta post a job, hire somebody, and they're gonna be leaving in the middle of August to go back to college.
Yeah. I think it's kind of,
It falls out, so,
well, I just.
Unless they already have
you know,
somebody in
unless you get
mind.
somebody
Do
from like
you know if they already have
Northeast
somebody?
who's on a trimester, you can bring them in on a co-op type deal.
Yeah, that's what I mean, it's not a summer internship
It's
like
not
it says
gonna be
here,
a
but yeah,
summer
right.
intern.
I
Summer's
agree
over.
with all that, but I also,
I mean, if you
like I
need-
said, I believe the project's going to move forward whether you support it through the
well
reserve
then
fund
in
or
that
not.
case,
you know, I'm all right with supporting it, I just think we're gonna be looking at this a couple different times, because I just don't think it's enough money.
Jay, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I think the TA's budget can probably, I haven't talked to Nina about this, but TA's budget could probably support it, especially if the assistant town administrator, and there's some salary there that could be freed up, so $3,000 I don't think is going to be an issue.
so that would keep it out of the reserve fund transfer.
Right.
Okay, let's go down that road first. And, you know, I believe you can announce, but you just can't bring them on. Correct? So we would have time after an announcement to vote on this again, once we have a more realistic.
Absolutely.
If it was deemed to be, an absolute, that we had to go through the reserve fund. But that isn't, I don't think that's been presented, at least in the little snippet here. And where you just explained that there's money available,
Potentially.
potentially, with the assistant town administrator potentially leaving.
Do I have a motion, one way or another on this?
I'd make a motion to defer, or, but not defer, but to not move forward on this request.
Okay. Motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Staying.
Okay.
You can say no.
We'll take
Stand
the,
up, come on.
take public input. Hearing none, we'll move along. Member input. Just a quick run around the table. Any updates for people? Steve?
Just from the PMBC side, we've completed the Houghton building roof. We've completed the split system in the vaults. We're working on the ADA lift at Champlain School. We're working with the highway department on their roof repair work, the salt shed, and the sidewalk and curbs up at the high school. We're doing we've completed some destructive testing on the facade of the police station. There's some significant issues there. We had voted at town meeting, I think it was $37,500 for the repair work. It's pretty obvious that that's going to be insufficient, so we're going to have to figure out, I've already talked to Steve about needing additional money to deconstruct and reconstruct the facade of the police station. That's about it. What's that?
I expected that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the 245, that is snow and ice, is available for one-time use as per our policy. That could be one project to get in line for that. I'm sure there'll be many people raising their hands, but that's one that if we can get our act together between now and fall town meeting, maybe
Right.
that can slide in there, I don't know.
Yeah, we're trying to identify an engineer to come in and, we've done the destructive testing. We're waiting on the report from Vertex, which should be in next week. And then we need to get an engineer to come in and put together a bid package so we can put it out for bid and then award it. So it's a process, and it's going to be probably the fall until we get any bids in.
How many buildings have lasted more than 10 years? Holy cow.
Well, apparently when the police station was constructed, the upper layer up around the parapet was installed in freezing weather, and they didn't properly heat the enclosure, so there's a lot of
Water damage.
freeze-thaw damage up there.
Wow. Okay.
So
There's no fallback on
Well, we went back to the contractor 3 years ago when some of the mortar showed issues. And they came back at no cost and raked that mortar, but apparently didn't clean out the joints and re-mortared, but it's just all falling out.
So back to your point, is there a chance they can get on the town meeting so we can try to earmark some of this money before it gets, that's all. I mean, that's a great project for that,
For town meeting?
for that fund, yeah, if we can get it, but
Yeah,
but that's a lot of work to be done between now and two.
it is, yeah.
So
I'll keep you guys up to
Yeah.
speed on it.
Okay, but that's just a thought, if it's there. But I'm sure, like, everybody will be in line for that money. But if we can at least get it on the radar screen, maybe we can do something.
Right.
I think earmarks of it, we talked about that a lot. Let's talk about the senior center and all that stuff, right? Is there a way just to earmark some money, put it's in the fund or something like that? Anyway, we don't need to
Plus,
decide that
we'll
now
have
and
to
wait
get
and
there
see,
when
but
we get
yeah, right.
closer, right?
Right.
Anything? That's it?
No, one of the things I'm on is the Transportation Advisory Council. It's kind of a group of a lot of different people just interested in transportation and safety and so on around town. And one of the things that has come to the attention between Magic and some of these regional consortium and other things that come across the emails and other things, there's grant money out there for safety projects. So whether it's a pedestrian crosswalk or
Well, sidewalks.
lights or the signs, you know, the blink and give you a happy face if you're going under the speed limit, stuff like that. But you know, it can be broader than that as well. Some of them are targeted, like AARP has some specific money that might be better for seniors. And so we're just trying to make it known that there's some of these things out there. We're trying to get ideas from people. If you happen to think of something, oh gee, it would be nice if, and you know, fill in the blank what that might be. But anyway, that's one of the things that's going on right now, just if people have ideas of something that
Sidewalks,
seems, well, yeah,
like on the main roads anyway, but I mean, we've got some, but
right.
there's some roads that don't. have
Yeah,
it.
and there's, right, okay, so I'll put that on the list, and obviously it's come up especially around the schools and so on, there's some safe schools, there's some special money for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, find a sidewalk on Shaker Lane Road.
Right, exactly, well, and that is, exactly. So, anyway, that's
Okay.
one of my updates.
Great. Tom? Okay. All right, I have the minutes from March 19th that went out a while ago, and we could not approve because we didn't have the right quorum. We do tonight. Anybody have any comments, concerns, questions on the minutes that went out? I know Greg had one part that she changed on it.
Was that on the 19th? I gotta go
Yeah.
back and look at
Yeah.
it. Okay, so if that was changed, then
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the 19th with that change.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, just note down for Maryland that they were approved so we can get them posted up on the website.
Did she fix the minutes? I think it was from April 3rd. Going back off of memory, when I saw the minutes, they were 2018 minutes. They were 2019.
Yeah, the
So she
date
fixed
was-
those and
the
you
date
addressed
was-
that?
Yeah. Yeah, we did that when we did that, yeah. Okay, the only thing we have is committee reorg for the fiscal year 2020. I guess accept nominations for the chair. Hearing none. There's a vacuum out there.
I nominate Gary as chair.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Gary, you good? I mean, you guys, I mean, if you really can't do it, then you need to say so too, but you'd be awesome on it.
No, I appreciate the nomination. It's like everything, I think Greg and I are still kind of in that we travel quite a bit, so that's always a concern, like, you know, being able to be fully committed into it. And that was my concern, I mentioned before.
You know, and I'm just thinking about that because I know that's a concern of yours and Greg's and so on. I think we need to figure out a way to make the vice chair have more of a role, because right now it's really the chair and then,
Yeah,
you know, nobody else, I mean, they do, you know, everybody else is a member.
yeah.
And if there's a way we can figure out to balance that out a little bit more and make it,
Yeah. But that was my only concern.
It's been my concern, especially since I had some changes go through my job last year. And I made it work the year before as chair, but Tuesday nights, boy, Tuesday and Wednesday, the worst nights of the week for me.
In terms of travel.
Yeah, travel.
Yeah.
It's never on a Monday or a Friday, but it's always midweek when I travel. So I try to work around it, but it's always a challenge.
Well, shall we consider changing to Monday nights? I don't know what that does to other people.
Well, you won't have this room because you got selectmen on Monday nights
Right.
unless you work
We
around the
could-
selectmen's
we'd probably
schedule.
go to the fire station, the police station.
Or the cafeteria.
or through even, I don't know, through our plan, right? We go to the VFW.
Little
right?
stuff shop, yeah,
Renting
BMW,
it.
right, yeah.
It definitely helps not being on a Tuesday night, that's for sure.
Okay, well,
But
that's
I know,
something.
I tried this before, and you guys were like, oh, no, that's not gonna work, so.
I don't know,
I remember I asked
that
that
might be a good thing, though. The Monday night wouldn't make a big difference, I think, for people in
If
terms of.
it does.
Well, the only problem for me, you know, is that I go to some of these Board of Selectmen meetings, so there would be a conflict for me.
I sometimes have to go for other reasons too, so.
But they don't meet every week, right?
No, they don't.
You'd have to work around their schedule.
Well, we could try to work around their schedule
not that
and be an alternate Mondays or something from them.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm signing up to be a chair.
Taking this excuse away.
It's gotta be a good reason.
You gotta give something to get
On
something.
Tuesday, yeah.
Okay, that's something that we can try to address going forward. Well, we have a motion on the floor. And a second?
I'd just like to hear, Gary, if you're comfortable with it or not. I mean, I don't wanna vote you in if you don't wanna do it, or you don't have the time to do it, because I know what it's like to try to do this when you're traveling quite a bit. It is a challenge to be chair.
No, you know, I think I can make it work. I think it's, like I said, if your idea of leaning on the vice a little bit sometimes probably makes a lot of sense. So I would take it on. So, if you'd have me.
Okay. Well, then any other?
Fred, you're not too disappointed if you're not chair again? Just want to make sure, nothing personal.
It's really hurting my feelings.
Okay, that's what I thought, okay.
But I wasn't slated to be this year. But
I
stepped
know,
in, so.
you stepped in.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Now, if you're lucky, you can find a vice.
Yeah. Looking for nomination.
Good. It's your meeting.
Oh, it's still your meeting.
Oh,
Please.
Yeah, that's not fair.
Nice try.
All right, any recommendations for vice chair?
I nominate Fred Faulkner.
Second.
Any further discussion?
It used to be, when I first came on, and when, of course, I ended up in that role too way back quicker because of some changes.
That's what
The
it used
idea
to do.
was that the chair was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
The first year, you had the former chair as the vice chair, so they had some support, and then the next year you had, the expected person was gonna become up, so they could be ramping up. So having Fred do it would kind of go back to that
Yeah,
model a little bit.
I think it's your experience too, you know, if I can speak on that behalf, and some of the obvious changes, this was a big year of change for us as well, and
Oh,
your,
wow, yeah.
I mean, I rely heavily on your experience, so, and I would regardless whether you were just a member or not, but I think it's important, especially with a lot of the discussion, policy changes and discussion with the town administrator wanting to change a few things, and some of your recommendations, Steve, as well.
Move to close nominations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Then I have a nomination and a second for vice chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Congratulations.
Noted.
I nominate Tom as the clerk because he's doing such a good job over here.
Absolutely, I second that.
Second, yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that Tom with the basketball?
He gets a little above.
Is that like Wilson, my version of Wilson?
So, okay, anything else from anybody? Steve?
Nope.
Nope.
I'm
Better
good.
text my wife for us to see if it's.
Yeah, I guess it's okay. for you.
Too late now.
Right.
All right, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, move second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're out of here.
All right.